Welcome to another episode of a very British space program with a very big rocket launching. This is episode 50. This is the 5th of May 1966, and after the launch of our Tempest 2 station to the moon, we've got another craft going up on a large super heavy, and I'm going to call this the Grey Queen. I've decided. Comments down below if you think that's a terrible name. I was tempted to call it Black Arrow, but I think I just can't bring myself to do that. So yeah, this is going to go on a 5-day trip to the moon, and on top of it is what we are calling the Turing-1 craft. Yeah, named obviously after the recently departed Alan Turing, father of modern computing, who made all of this possible. So, please join me. So the Turing is going to capture around the moon using that stage that we actually saw in the last episode, our little sort of lunar sort of service module capsule. I haven't actually given it a name. It's just my lunar sort of body transfer capture stage. And it's going to use that to capture, and it will also use it to do some sort of refining, changing inclination, and all sorts of stuff, because we want to bring this in and we want to dock it to Tempest 2. Yeah, Tempest 2 is going to be our target for this. So there we go. We use our main engines. Now, the engines on this are they're row engines, they're row version 2 engines, and they're actually lunar rows, so they have some degree of throttleability to them. Not much, but some. So it's basically, they do lose a lot of efficiency because of that, so they're not the most efficient of engines, but throttleability was decided to be important for us. So the craft is going to come in and dock, and I will say this is one of my best dockings. It is not, I don't believe it is my best ever, but this is a really nice docking. This is actually sped up. Because of course you can see the timer is on the yellow because it is taking its time, and you can see here a little bit of thrust there forward to slow down, which is annoying. Almost perfect, almost zero thrust towards the space harbor there, and there we go. So the space harbor has a new component to it, and you'll notice it's got landing legs. That's right. So now we are ready for the big one. It is the 23rd of May 1966, and we are going to do something we've done many times before. We're going to try and put a flag on a piece of land. The difference being that, first of all, this piece of land is the moon and not a country, and secondly, we're not doing it to try and expand the empire. No, we don't need to expand the empire. We're doing it to expand humanity's minds. That's what we're telling people anyway. In reality, we just want to prove our superiority, if I'm entirely honest. And we also want to try and get people to start thinking about the idea of, the Earth is a limited size, and we may need to maybe expand beyond that. So up we have launched one of our Faraday 3s. It's just a standard Faraday 3 on a Blue Knight booster. We're not operating the Grey Queen to do any sort of crewed launches, so we're having to do this, and it's a bit, I suppose, if you want to think about this, is a bit sort of like what was going to happen with I think it was the Ares program, where Ares 1 was going to launch crew, and then the Ares 5 was going to launch the heavy materials for stuff. So it's very, very similar to that, and I didn't realize until I actually was launching this that that's sort of what we were doing. Obviously, Matthew West, head of the astronaut office, was asked to select 2 pilots for this, and he had only 2 names that he could really choose. That is Carol Freeman and Kim Jarvis. So we've got Carol, the first to command a multi-crewed spacecraft, and of course Kim Jarvis, the first person to orbit the Earth. It's a putting all your eggs in one basket mission, this one. We're doing everything. We're throwing everything we've got at it. They have never flown together, however, and so this is a first for them. So we do have another Faraday at Launch Complex 10. We have another Faraday 3 sat waiting as a backup just in case anything goes wrong. I will point that out, and you will probably see that at the end if you stick around at the very end to see what's going on with the series. You'll see what's actually happening. So so the Faraday 3 sets off to the moon, and this is a transfer that we've now done multiple times. We've actually captured around the moon, so this is not new for us. This is something we've done before. So this is, I think, our 4th trip now to the moon, our 2nd orbital trip, and we're just gonna take our time with it. We're just gonna move on. The aim for this is to dock to obviously Tempest Space Harbor, and whilst my first docking in this episode was good, I think this one was superb. if I remember rightly. I'm probably going to prove myself wrong because I'm trying to remember back to it. So this was really just a nice little flow of movements. I was trying not to fire my thrusters towards the space harbour, if I'm entirely honest. I'm trying to stop myself from doing that. So I'm trying to keep a little bit of forward sort of speed, and then we get a little bit of freezing up and things like that. The good thing about the Faraday 3 is that it is actually reasonably manoeuvrable. I spent a long time getting it right when we were designing it, and I probably spent more time on the Faraday 3 than I probably should have. And we go in there, you see we're coming in and not a single thrust in the wrong direction towards the space harbour. So there we go, they are on the space harbour there. They get off, they have a wander around. Well, let's don't have a wander around, they have a float around, obviously. One thing they do is they actually hook some fuel lines up between Node X and Faraday, because they want to actually fuel up just its lower tanks. It's actually got a lower tank designed to hold more than enough for a return trip. So we're just going to do that. It can do that automatically, but we're going to do that. And then they jump into the Turing 1 lander, and they are going to separate. So the Turing 1, obviously landing legs, you can see where this is going, can't you? Yes, that's absolutely right. It's 1966, and we have decided now is the time. We have got our little colony space around the moon. It's now time to plant that flag and make the world take note. And this is pretty much just to prove to the Americans that they may be a bigger nation than us, but I think history sometimes favours the more experienced individuals. I think that's what we're going to go for. So the Turing 1 lander basically departs slowly from Tempest Space Harbour, and it's going to take its time. It's going to let itself just drift away. We used the bumpers on the docking node just to push us away, and then we don't really want to use much in the way of RCS right now because we're just letting ourselves drift. We do apply a little bit of RCS to one side, but that's about it. We're going to let it drift away. Now, once we're suitably far away, we're going to fire the engines, and it's going to set us onto a trajectory to encounter, well, shall we say, a very close flyby of the surface. And it is this point I should point out, this craft is a single stage from orbit to landing, from landing to orbit. It will not be losing any components. That makes this Turing 1 reusable. We have fuel in orbit, and we have a Turing 1 that can go up and down multiple times. It has row engines that can do some throttling and can restart, and that's important to us. So here we are, they're starting their second burn. We do have, or I did have, some interesting situations with MechJeb and stock SAS, primarily being that yeah, they don't like playing with this save anymore, in particular with this craft. So it was actually, although stock SAS and MechJeb are on intermittently throughout this, a lot of the orientation control was actually me overriding it. It was not great fun, and you can see there we're actually throttling the raw lunar engines now, just to slow down our approach. We're trying to basically monitor our approach. Now I do have the landing guidance on the left hand side. I didn't use auto landing. I probably could have with this craft because I think it's probably got enough thrust for it, but I wanted to do the manual landing for this, primarily because of that RCS issue and orientation control and stuff like that, and secondly because if this goes wrong I kill two of my favorite pilots, which would be a big thing. So yeah, I was a little concerned about that. This was all in one take, by the way. This was one take, start to finish, and I forgot to save before a lot of this, so that's a problem, shall we say. So it comes down, and you can see we actually overdid the burn just ever so slightly. We were going quite nicely. I could have done with throttling down much earlier, but I was paranoid because we would actually come over a raised section of land, and so my predictions for where we're coming down were a little bit off, shall we say. We weren't quite perfect on it, and so there you go. We're coming down, and then we basically, it's not the most pretty of landings. We're basically just holding it just now. The gravity of the moon is enough just so that this is working out. What I should have actually done, and there we go. What I should have done is actually had an action group to shut down 2 of the engines. In reality, I didn't need all 4 for the final stage of landing. So we're down on the moon, and there is only one thing to do when you're down on the moon. It's go back into, no, it's get out of the craft is what it is. So we unfurl our little set of ladders, and of course first onto the surface is Carol Freeman. She is the first to exit the capsule. She may have been beaten to orbit by Kim, but she will be going down as the first person to step up on the moon. And obviously she said something really important about T and the Empire and the Queen, but unfortunately the signal was not particularly great at that point, and yeah, we don't have a recording of it. It's terrible, I know, absolute nightmare. We do plant a flag, and we put something interesting on a little plaque there, but we don't imagine anybody's ever going to read it, if I'm entirely honest. We don't expect that many other nations are going to be capable of landing upon the moon, because, you know, well, they're just not as good, are they? Let's be entirely honest. So, yeah. The crew spend a little bit of time on the surface, but actually Kim and Carol, they get a few samples and things like that, but there's not much for them to do. This is just a proof of concept, and I'm not entirely sure what Carol thinks she's doing there. I don't know. And so then after a while, it's time to go, basically. It's time to get going home. We've gathered science, we've taken samples, you know. We don't have any equipment to set up on the surface. It would be really nice if there was. If somebody wants to sort that out, that'd be brilliant. Some deployable science of some sort. And so we've got our samples, and it's time to head off home, or more accurately, to Tempest, because this lander is not capable of basically landing around Earth, so we need to do something about that. So we need to go to Tempest. So we're just going to check that we've got data transfer. We've got a little bit of science just to finish off while we're down there, and then it's time to depart. So engines off, and there we go. Again, I should have potentially shut down 2 engines. If we did shut down a pair of engines there, I think the launch and landing would have been a little bit easier. So note to self, actually set the some of the action groups up a little bit better, but again, not perfect. Anyway, we pull it into orbit, and this was actually a lot easier than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be horrendous. We waited for the space harbor to basically be near us. I could have actually, you know, saved it and done some bits and bobs and made sure it was perfect, but I thought, no, let's just go for this. Let's be semi-realistic. So we're going up, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to a slightly higher orbit because we're ahead, and then the idea is that we're going to circularize in that higher orbit, and we're going to let the station catch up with us. And there is enough life support on the lander, on the Turing, for I think it's about 5 or 6 days. It's actually got a good chunk of life support, not like the Faraday, which as a basic capsule does not have a lot. The Turing actually has quite a lot of life support, so it's a nice life raft. It does not have well, it does. It has enough just to have a Faraday come from Earth or come from the space harbor and rendezvous with it. It doesn't have enough to basically act as a long-term life raft. It would have to be supported. Whereas obviously Tempest 2, you can stay on there for, I think it's like 60 days. We've got a long time there, so we have to have craft ready to rescue if need be. But you know what, we hopefully won't need that. So there we are. The crew will basically put it into orbit around the moon, and yeah, it's just gonna. It gives them some staggering views. If anything, you can see there the Earth in the distance, and they just take it in for a few hours while they wait for the rendezvous to occur. And the rendezvous, again, we're actually doing some really nice rendezvous around the moon. I will say, I think rendezvousing around the moon is so much easier than around the Earth, and I'm wondering why, in fact, because we are actually quite low around it. There's significant curvature, and so I'm not entirely sure. It's quite interesting though. Maybe I've just got better at it. I don't know. But obviously the Turing has the most up-to-date computer systems that we could possibly get. And of course, being the leaders in computer technology, because while we originally thought after the Second World War of keeping it secret and keeping it quiet, we actually decided to push on with it and make it public, our development of the computer with permanent memory and so forth and things like that. So the UK is obviously a leader in computation now. With other nations lagging behind. In fact, many households in the UK are now expecting to get their own little computer terminals so they can access all sorts of interesting things. We're not entirely sure what those interesting things will be, but they'll be interesting things. We may even have, movies and computer games about the British flying to the moon. That would be quite funny, wouldn't it, to have British children playing computer games about flying to the moon and acting as though they're the pilots and things like that on it. Yeah. Anyway, we come in for docking, and yeah, it's a pretty sort of smooth ride, actually. I've sped this up a little bit because we're just moving slowly, but you see there, I think we get a little bounce, but that's primarily because we've left the bumper out, which is the big mistake. So we actually contacted really nicely, and so the crew will spend a couple of days on Tempest, just as a precaution, should we say. We're just going to ensure that everything is okay with them. They're going to check the samples are sealed properly, because we don't want to bring anything dangerous back to the Earth. And then it's time to depart. So they jump onto their Faraday 3. I don't say jump, they float onto their Faraday 3. It decouples and off it goes. It's just going to, again, allow itself to move slowly away from the station. And they have spent in total probably about sort of 10 days around the moon, or on the way to the moon right now. So this is going to be one of the longest missions we've ever had. The Faraday, of course, was shut down while it was on the station, so its reserves of water and food and oxygen were actually saved. But we also topped it up a bit. The crew could take some stuff across. They took over some lithium hydroxide canisters and things like that, because all of our canisters are interchangeable. We make a very interchangeable set of craft. And then it was just a case of firing up those row engines and getting back to the Earth. Now, the positive, of course, with the Faraday 3 is it has 4 of them, so even if 1 or 2 of them break, we're still going to get back to Earth. So at this point, we're feeling very positive. You will see the image has frozen, however, because that's one of the glitches that we get. That's right. This is an example of the freeze. Yeah, there we go. That's what we had. So the thing is, the craft is going to fly through space, and we're going to come down, and because we're coming from that equatorial orbit around the moon, we're not able to actually get a really nice approach to the Earth. So we actually have to do a burn when arriving into the Earth's sphere of influence, just to refine that. But it does mean we're coming in pretty much in a polar orbit, which is not ideal, but we will live with it. So the crew are going to come down, and then we get our little decoupling process going on. And again, this is a lovely little example there of how it should be done. So we put ourselves on the normal, we decouple, and then the capsule will actually reorientate itself using its RCS thrusters and put itself into the retrograde position, and then it will fire itself through the atmosphere. Now, we're hoping for a one orbit in sort of landing. We're expecting to bounce a little bit. We're going to use a little bit of lifting body re-entry on this one. We're going to let the capsule tilt just a little bit, just to give us a little lift there. So you can see we're going to come through. We're going to get a bit of heating, and then the heating will start to die down, and then we're going to start to head up, and then we're going to head back down a bit, and then we get a bit more heating. There we go, back down into the atmosphere. And there we go, done. So a nice, I think that's probably our best re-entry from Luna yet. And on this mission, it was really important to get it. Of course, the parachutes deploy, and we are pretty much done. The crew come down, they land. By the way, that's water underneath there. Another glitch with the game at the moment. So we get a reasonable amount of science, and that's it. That's the end of it. That's us done. We have been to the moon. Well, we've got the ability to go again. We've got a lander in orbit that can go down. It's got fuel, because of course we have a fuel tank in orbit that's going to fuel it. So we have enough fuel to go back down to the surface. We can launch a Blue Knight rocket with a Faraday 3, and we can send another crew down. It's not actually that difficult for us. We have the ability to change our inclination, stuff like that. So yeah, we've got all that. We have a bucket load of money, and we have done a lot of science. I thought I'd show you this before I actually end the episode. So you can see all the science we've got going and stuff like that. You can pause it, have a look at it. This series will be pausing now. I'm not going to say it's going to end. It's going to pause now. It's going to pause now because the glitches have got too far. I really wanted to take it to Mars. I really wanted to go to Mars with the crew, but if it was just saving and so forth that were difficult and transitions, I would stick with it. The problems with orbital mechanics right now, and with time warp limitations, not just with changing orbital mechanics, but with actually the docking processes and things like that, is just problematic. We've also had a lot of other little glitches coming in. What I will try and do is actually take the way I designed this pack originally was it's very much heavily integrated into RP-1. So I'm going to try and extract it from RP-1 and put it together in its own little pack, and then I can update it. One of the other things is that since I started this, engines have been added to RP-1 for some of the British craft, and not all the engines I would like, and not in the way I would like, but that's an option. So we may do an express to orbit as the British at some point, but I'm not gonna close the door on this. Episode 50 is not the end, it is just a moment for pause. So comment down below, tell me what you think. It would be great to get your feedback. What other interesting space programs would you like to see us do? What did you like about the series? What didn't you like about the series? And yeah, so from me, until next time, have a great one.